Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loki here. Join me today as we do some more fall garden prep and overwinter plants. So let's go. This time of year, the main things that I'm doing in my New Hampshire Zone 5B garden is keeping up with the leaves. And I love bringing you along to show you the leaves in my yard. I've gotten some comments from a few of my gardening friends asking, why don't I just leave the leaves on the lawn? They're very good for the lawn. Or why don't I bag the leaves up and put them where they can turn into leaf mulch, or leaf mold, I guess is the right word. Some other questions have been, can't I use these leaves and shred them up and put them in my compost pile, or use those shredded leaves as basically a nice protective layer on the soil to help feed the soil life? All of that is true, and if I have time this year, I am planning to get some leaves and shred them. But I wanted to walk around the yard because I think it's so important as a gardener and as someone that makes videos on YouTube to be real. And we all have different things that we deal with in our garden, and it doesn't matter where you live. It might be a small space, it might be a large space, and you might live in a different part of the country. Maybe you don't have any trees, but this is real life gardening, and I embrace it because I love living out here where we have a lot of trees. I feel like that is nature's natural way of just basically providing me winter interest. And actually, I want to show you that tree has blown over in the wind that we've had recently. So we're going to have to do something about that, my husband and I, and just cut that down. So yeah, I just wanted to bring you along. You know, normally every day this time of year, I'm blowing leaves, but it is very windy today. So that's not what I'm going to be doing today. And I also am not planning on really working in any of my flower beds. I do have a lot of cleanup work that needs to be done in my flower beds, but when you live where there's a lot of trees around you, it's actually not safe to be out here because you can see a lot of heavy sticks, and not even, I call them twigs, but they're pretty, you know, some of them can be very sizable. They can fall on you. So I don't want to be out here doing any sort of yard work. In fact, one thing I am planning to do, and I have started, it's down here, and it's basically my plant nursery. I have been working in my plant nursery, and I have to continue working in my plant nursery. But again, it's not safe to be working in the plant nursery on a windy day like today because, well, I just don't want to get hurt. But I just wanted to start this video by walking you around the yard and showing you what's going on. Look at the driveway, look at all the leaves down there. And again, as many of you know, I've been pretty diligent about blowing leaves, and I'll continue to blow them, but definitely not today. So I figured I'd bring you along, and I'm going to show you some of the things that we're going to work on. And they're going to be in here in the barn. Oh, and don't tell my husband, I'm leaving the barn doors open so I can let some fresh air in because it's actually in the 50s. It feels really nice out today. But look at all these leaves. They're just going to blow right into the barn. That's okay. Shh, we're not going to tell him. Here is my rolling cart, and I had it inside yesterday because it was actually pretty cool outside. But today, even though it's windy, it's warm. Even with the wind, it's like 55 degrees or 53 degrees Fahrenheit air temperature. So it's a good day for these plants to be out here. And if you've missed any of my videos, I've made a lot of videos showing my process for overwintering plants. Just, you can do a search on those on my channel. But today we're going to be working in my messy barn. So let's get started. I have a lot of plants in my barn that I want to overwinter in my garage. And my garage does not drop to below 40 degrees Fahrenheit during the winter months. So for right now, what I've been doing is keeping a lot of these plants temporarily in my barn. My barn is not attached to my house, so it can get extremely cold in January or February, whereas my garage has a little bit of a warmer temperature because it's connected to my house. So the first plant we're going to be working on are my Supertunias. I have 3 pots of them, and I'm going to try to overwinter them. I tried once before, and honestly, I think the reason why I was not successful with overwintering them was because I gave them too much water. And I mentioned this many times in my videos, but these plants that are dormant, meaning they're asleep for the winter, They can be in darkness, or they can be getting very, very little sunlight coming through the windows, but they're not under grow lights. They're not in an area that's warm. In fact, it's pretty cold. So I'm just trying to limp them along. I'm trying to keep them alive. I'm trying to keep the roots alive. So what I'm going to be doing with my Supertunias is I'm going to be cutting them back pretty hard. And then I'm going to be giving them water only once a month, and that's it. And fingers crossed, I will hopefully be able to overwinter my Supertunias this year. I'll be cutting these back where the stems are just barely beyond the side of the pots. I want to make sure that I leave enough green on here, but I also don't need all of this green growth. So I'll be cutting it back pretty hard. I've been getting a lot of questions lately on overwintering plants. And basically, what are the ideal conditions for overwintering plants? What I've been sharing with my gardening friends is, honestly, I wish there was one answer that applied to every single plant that you want to overwinter. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So it does require a certain level of research. And that's what I do. When it comes to each and every plant that I'm trying to overwinter, I use the internet and I research it. And I don't just go to one site, I go to many sites. And I make sure that the information I'm getting is coming from a reputable site. And what is a reputable site? Well, it really is going to vary. I would tell you that start with like a local university or cooperative extension, but some other people might argue that's not a good resource. So use your best judgment. I also like to go to other people's YouTube channels, but again, I'm always taking the information I'm getting, regardless of the source, with a grain of salt. And I try to go to multiple sites and get as much information as I can. And then based on that, I then experiment. And I try to see what's going to work best for me. And when it comes to overwintering plants, what works best for me might not work best for you. But I do like to look at things like, in order to successfully overwinter a plant, does it need light? Because some plants just do. They just absolutely need light in order to overwinter. But then there are many plants that can actually overwinter just fine in a dark room or with very, very little light. I also like to research temperature. Some plants will die if they are below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Some plants will die if they're below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And some plants will die once the temperatures are below freezing. So again, that's where the research part comes in. You really want to know not only the light conditions, but the temperature that that individual plant needs in order to survive. And when I say survive, it all depends on what you're looking for. I'm typically looking for, I want my plant to survive at a dormant stage, at a dormant level, because I just want to take a break. I don't want to be babying the plant. Now, you might not mind bringing the plant in and treating it as a house plant. So in that case, it's not dormant, it's alive, it's going to be blooming for you. But I prefer not to do that. And that's why you don't see that a lot in my videos, because I just want to have a break for the winter before seed starting season begins. And I also want to utilize that space that I have indoors primarily for the plants that I'm starting from seed. But the one thing that I've learned about plants that are dormant is you don't want to forget about them. You want to check on them. And usually you want to check on them about once a month. And the biggest way you can kill a dormant plant is by loving it too much by overwatering it. I very rarely will tell you in my videos, this is the easy way to do something. And the reason is, I don't want to lie to you. I want to be honest and just tell you that things are possible, but they're going to require work. Because in my own garden, no matter if I'm outside of my garden or if I'm trying to overwinter plants, everything requires a certain level of work. But if you're willing to put in that work, then the payoff can be huge. On a later date, if I want to, I can come in with these Supertunias and I can pot them down, meaning take them out of these big pots and put them into something smaller. But for today, because I have so many other projects I need to complete, I'm happy with this. And if I don't get to potting this down, that's fine. But generally, I do prefer to put my overwintered plants into smaller pots for the simple reason that I can monitor the moisture level and I can avoid overwatering them. But on the flip side, if you have a plant in a larger pot, then you're basically insulating the roots a little bit more. So again, you want to use your judgment on whether or not you want to use a larger pot or a smaller pot when it comes to overwintering different plants. So for the Supertunias, this is what it looks like. Pretty much nothing. And I'm going to just wait and give it time. I'm going to be leaving it outside during the daytime as long as the temperature is above 40 degrees Fahrenheit, so we can continue to basically photosynthesize before it goes dormant for the winter. In fact, these are some other Supertunias that we worked on in a previous video that we cut back really hard. So you can see they're pushing out a little bit of new growth. They are still green. So that's pretty much what happens right this time of year. And then eventually when they go in for the winter months, they really shouldn't be blooming as much. Another question I get has to do with pruning. To prune or not to prune when overwintering plants? Again, it's going to depend on what the plant is, the conditions where you're trying to overwinter it, in terms of light, in terms of dark, in terms of temperature. So do your research on that also. I have perennial mums here. Now, I have perennial mums out in my landscape that I planted in the summer with you. Those mums, I will not be pruning back. I will be leaving them as is because this top growth, even if it's dead and ugly, is going to protect the base of my plant. And that's especially true for any perennial mum that I've planted this year. With perennial mums I've had in my landscape for a number of years, I probably could cut them back now that they've started to go by, but I most likely will leave them up as well because I feel like, again, this top growth is going to protect their crown. When it comes to these perennial mums that I bought on clearance at the end of the season that I want to overwinter, in my area where I live, New Hampshire Zone 5B, it is too cold for me to take this and put it in the ground. But where you live, you might live somewhere where it's much warmer. You could leave your perennial mum in its pot as long as you're making sure it doesn't dry out, and it may overwinter and come back for you just fine. Or you may take this perennial plant, put it in your landscape, and it comes back fine for you. It really depends on where you live. But if you research perennial mums and how to get them to survive year after year, usually in the colder climates like the one I live in, these mums take a long time for their roots to establish. I don't have enough time if I was to take this, put it out in my landscape and try to overwinter it. And that's why I'm going to be overwintering a handful of perennial mums that I got on clearance. I've tried it a few ways where I've left the top growth on and just kept the plant as is. And I've also done it where I've come in and cut off the top growth. What I choose to do this year is I will be cutting off the top growth, but I can see at the base that the plant is pushing out new growth. And if you're doing the same thing as me and you're trying to overwinter some perennial mums in a warmer place like a garage or a basement, you can experiment with one of them. You can cut off the top growth. With another one, you can leave the top growth on and see what works best for you. But since I've done it both ways and I've seen both ways have worked for me, I'm going to go ahead and just remove the top growth. So I'm just going to use my hand pruners and I'm going to come in, and I don't want to cut it back too hard either. So I'm just coming in and lightly cutting it back. And when I say lightly cutting it back, I guess I'm cutting it back by about 50% or so. As I'm filming this video, I will say that the lighting might not be the best, but the purpose of this video is more just to show you what I'm doing in my garden and also to talk to you about different techniques, different strategies when it comes to overwintering plants. All the material that I'm chopping off today, as long as it's not diseased, I can go ahead and add all of this to my compost pile. And all those leaves that I showed you earlier, hopefully pretty soon I'll be coming in, shredding up the leaves and basically warming up my compost pile with the brown material, which is the leaves, and the green material, which is all of these clippings and cuttings from my garden. I'm just using hand pruners because that's what I have handy. If you had some other different tool that does the same type of job, feel free to use that as well. I have a number of mums, so I will be doing the same process to all of them. And again, I'm just trying to clean it up. During the winter, I will be showing you what I do for each of my plants, what I'm checking for, how much water I'm giving them, in case you want to follow along. If you don't have any mums in your landscape, I just think they're such a great plant to have come back year after year and to treat them as a perennial. You can always go to stores and see if they've marked them down. I have videos that show you more about the type of mums to look for when it comes to overwintering mums. So just check on my channel, do a search on mums, for example, and you'll find lots of different videos having to do with how to overwinter your mums. Today's video is not meant to be comprehensive and give all the details to that level. So definitely just check on my channel if you're looking for more information. And I'm not being perfect in terms of how I'm cutting this back. I'm just making sure I cut it back a little bit, because ultimately I just want the plant to be dormant and to focus its energy on keeping those roots alive. And you can see at the bottom here at the base of the plant, all the new growth that's shooting up. If I wanted to, I could have come in and cut this back a little bit harder. But for right now, I'm fine with this. And a different day, I can always come in and do more pruning to the plant. One thing I'm continuing to do is check the moisture level on my plants. It's not a set it and forget it type of thing when it comes to overwintering plants. So even though I will always say don't overwater your plants, you also don't want them to completely dry out. And each plant is different. So that's something else I've learned over the years when it comes to overwintering lots of different kinds of plants. Some plants will dry out faster than other plants. And it might be just simply because of the plant itself and its water needs, or it might be because of the size of the pot. Larger pots won't dry out as fast as smaller pots dry out. So you want to be checking the moisture level. And the other thing I am checking already, starting now, is the leaf litter that's at the bottom of each of my pots. I don't want an accumulation of leaf litter sitting at the bottom. I want to be constantly checking for that and removing it. And it's bound to happen. You can imagine, like, these leaves here are going to turn yellow, and then they're going to start dropping, and they're going to show up in the bottom of my pot. You don't want those leaves sitting there in the bottom of your pot. So you want to be checking for them all winter long and removing them, because those leaves can harbor pests or disease. Something else that I haven't really talked about a lot, but I figure I should mention, is I don't necessarily treat any of my plants for pests. In other words, I am not spraying these with neem oil or anything like that. And the reason is these are going to be going right in my garage. So hopefully the pests will go away and find a different place to go to. I've never had an issue. In fact, one winter, when it was like the middle of winter, I found a little ladybug sitting on one of my plants. Somehow the good pests find the bad pests. But that doesn't mean you don't have to. If you want to and you want to spray all your plants that you're overwintering, by all means you can spray them. Now, if I was bringing these plants in to my house or even into my basement, I would probably spray them because I don't want pests inside of my house. But I have found I haven't had to spray anything when I bring it into my garage. I don't take up water and spray everything off. I don't put neem oil, anything like that. And I have not had an issue. But that doesn't mean you wouldn't. So you want to do what you feel is right. And clearly, if all of a sudden you noticed an issue with pests, then you need to address that and handle it accordingly, depending on what the pest is. I have some hardy asters here. I never got them in the ground. It's my understanding that hardy asters also take a long time for their roots to establish. So I don't want to take a chance. I'm going to overwinter these. And then next spring, I can put them out in my landscape. When I pick up the pot, I can tell that this is super dry. So after I cut it back, I'll give it a drink of water. And because I'm bringing these plants outside during the daytime, because the daytime temperatures are still around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, that means they're going to dry out a little bit faster than when they are in my garage during the cold winter months. In other words, I will be watering the plants right this time of year as I'm bringing them outside more frequently than I will later in the winter when they are not coming out anymore and they're just staying in my garage. And there's no set number when it comes to how many ounces of water am I giving the plant. Again, it's going to depend on the size of the pot, on the plant itself, and how quickly it's absorbing the water. A general rule of thumb is pick up the pot, and if it feels super light, then it needs the smallest drink of water, especially during those very cold winter months. But if you pick up a pot and it feels fairly heavy, then it doesn't need any additional water. Another way you can do it is take your finger and put it in the soil 1 to 2 inches deep. And if the soil feels very dry, that means the plant needs a small drink of water. But when it comes to the mums and even this aster plant, the roots are so tightly bound inside of this pot, I don't think I can put my finger through the soil. So the best way for me to check it is just to pick it up. Another thing I want to mention is about fertilizer. All these plants that I'm overwintering, I will not be giving them any fertilizer because they're dormant. I don't want them to push on any new growth. I'm not trying to get the top part of the plant to look pretty. I'm trying to keep the bottom part of the plant, the roots, alive. And that's all I care about this time of year. And then in the spring, when the weather starts warming up, I will slowly start hardening off my plants by bringing them out again during the daytime, giving them some sun, and eventually giving them more water, and eventually giving them fertilizer. And I'll show you that later in the season when the time comes. But it comes down to temperature. During those daytime temperatures, when they're around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, that's about when I'm going to start hardening off my plants. But again, they're going to be coming back in during those cold nights. So I'm just going to continue clipping this back by about 1/3 to 1/2. I'll give it some water, and I'll give it enough water that when I pick it up, it feels a little heavier. It doesn't need to be super heavy, just a little bit heavier, and it'll go back on my rolling cart. And again, this time of year, the cart comes out during the day, comes back in during the night. These plants need a little bit more water this time of year, but in January or February, they won't need as much water. Look at the color of the soil for the mums, and it's a dark brown color. Now look at the soil for these aster. It's a light brown color. That's another indicator. When it's this light brown color, most likely the plant needs water. But I'm also picking up the pots, and I can clearly tell that this pot of mums is heavy. This pot of mums, it's light. I don't want to water from above because I don't want to cause disease, so I don't want to get the foliage wet. I'm going to go towards the center and give a small drink of water to start with. I'm going to pick it up. And by the way, if I saw water coming from the bottom, draining out, that's also another indicator that I don't need to add any more water. I'll give it a little bit more water, and that should be it. I saw some water come out from the bottom, so I definitely want to stop now. And that's good enough, and I'll keep checking not only this plant, but all my plants on my rolling cart. And if they need a little drink of water, I can give them some water. I have a couple of mums in little pots. I'm going to just remove the blooms off the top here, but I'm going to keep the green part at the bottom in place. Small pots don't need as much water, and I'm feeling this, and this feels super heavy. So other than cutting off the top growth, that's all I'm going to do with this one. Dusty Miller is borderline hardy where I live. It's usually hardy down to USDA Zone 7, and I'm in 5B. However, I have had Dusty Miller survive some winters for me, usually if the winters are not very harsh. I don't want to take a chance though. I have one in a pot. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to cut it back really hard because there's a lot of leggy growth here. And I'm just going to keep this basal growth right at the bottom here intact. I'm sure I could take these cuttings and root them, but time is of the essence. If you want to, you could definitely do that. You could try to research it because I don't think I have a video on my channel that shows how to take cuttings from Dusty Miller and root them. But I just want to have not as much growth on the top, and I want the plant to just focus on its roots for the winter months. I showed you in a previous video my Martha Washington geranium. It's still looking pretty, but I'm just checking it over. We had gone ahead and put it in a smaller container pot, and I did give it a very small drink of water. I didn't give it too much water. And other things I'm doing this time of year is, if it's going to keep blooming for me, that's fine, but I want to go ahead and remove any yellowing leaves, and I also want to keep removing any of the blooms that have gone by or spent blossoms. I could even come in here and remove the blossoms, but this plant will continue blooming for me basically until I bring it into my garage. And once I bring it into my garage and it's the middle of winter, at that point, I'm guessing that it will not bloom as much. The leaves will start to turn yellow, and then the plant will really go dormant. But I just want to keep maintaining it, even though I'm preparing it for dormancy. You'll have to let me know in the comments if you have successfully overwintered a Martha Washington geranium bare root. I've shown you in other videos my process for overwintering geraniums bare root, but I usually do that with my pelargoniums, the zonal geraniums. I only tried 1 year overwintering this type of geranium bare root, and it did not work for me. So I gave up for the simple reason that it's a pretty expensive plant and I didn't want to chance it again. But if I can get to a point where I'm taking more cuttings and I have more of these plants, I'm up for the challenge, and I'd love to try it again to try to overwinter this plant bare root. Speaking of bare root, someone asked me recently, what other plants can you overwinter bare root? And the question had to do with basically taking off all the soil. and overwintering a plant where it has no soil on its roots, like I've done before with my pelargoniums, the zonal geraniums. So we're talking not specifically canna lilies or calla lilies, things that have rhizomes, bulbs, or tubers, but more plants that just have roots. And my experience has been I've only tried it with zonal geraniums. I'd love to know if you have had success overwintering a plant without any soil on its roots. And again, I'm not talking about like elephant ears or canna lilies, but a plant that's more like this type of geranium. Have you had success taking the soil off and overwintering a plant in a dormant state like that? Let me know in the comments below. Because not only would it help me out, but it would also help anyone else that's reading the comments for them to at least give it a try. And that's pretty much all I'm doing when it comes to the Martha Washington geranium. I'm just cleaning it up a little bit. I still have a lot more to do when it comes to taking care of plants and preparing them for winter. There are dahlias. I have variegated vinca vine. There's lavender. I have yet more geraniums behind me. So I'll put those in a separate video, but I wanted to just bring you along today with a handful of plants that I was tending to and show you what I'm checking for this time of year. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please drop them down below. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.